Hello, it's Rico here from Rico Does More. Going to be changing, well, actually, I'm not going to be changing the belt. I'm going to be adjusting the timing on my Fiat Seicento Sporting. It's the 1.1 SPI engine. I changed the belt a few months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, and the timing is somehow slightly out. So I'm going to be adjusting that today. So just loosening the wheel nuts here, or the bolts as they are in this car. This will make it easier to take the wheel off when it's jacked up in the air. Don't forget to use a jack stand here. You're going to be working underneath the wheel arch and wouldn't want any unfortunate accidents. And the wheel's off. That's Teddy, the little monkey, or dog, I guess. And now we've got to remove the plastic covers inside the wheel arch there. There's 3 plastic covers on the inside of the wheel arch in total. One of them you have to remove the crankshaft pulley before you can take it out, but this one here and the inner wheel arch trim or cover you can get out straight away as soon as you take the wheel off. There's one screw under there for some reason, and also there is one bolt under there as well, underneath the front bumper, that you'll need to take out to get that cover out, and it's also clipped into the wheel arch. It just pops out like that. One of the bolts in mine is seized. I just left it hanging there. You can take yours completely off and move it out of the way. It might give you a little bit more space. And there, now you can see the crankshaft pulley and the drive belt. So I'm taking, there's one bolt that holds in that 3rd plastic cover. I'm taking that bolt out now. You can take the crankshaft pulley off first and then take it out. It's up to you, doesn't really matter. So you got to remember, when you're putting this back on, it'll only go in one position. You see that little hole on the right hand side there between the 2 bolt holes? That coincides with a little notch on the crankshaft, and that needs to go back in the same position. Alright, now you can take that 3rd plastic cover out. It's a bit of a nightmare to get in and put back in, to get out and put back in. I don't know why it's such a nightmare. I was faffing around for ages with this. And now you can see the water pump in there, and we've exposed a little bit more of the timing belt. So I actually changed the water pump last time I did this job. It's also a really simple job. Just unbolt it, pop it off, and stick the new one back on. Okay, now I'm disconnecting the battery and taking out the air filter on the air box. It just pops off. And I'm unbolting the water tank, or the coolant tank I should say. you won't be able to take it all the way off without draining it, so just unbolt it and move it to the side. It'll give you a little bit more space to work. Next, there's a plastic cover here, which is, there's some cables clipped into it, and there's also one bolt that holds it on. Mine is broken, so there's no bolts holding mine on, so very easily I can just unclip those cables from the top of it and pull it out, and that exposes the camshaft sprocket. So that's all the covers are removed really now. Ready to take the belt off. I'm missing a bit of footage here, so that's the camshaft sprocket that you can see there with the belt coming over it. Yeah, of course. We're going to also remove the ignition coil pack. Start by taking the ignition leads off. Remember which order they go in. You can either make a mark on them, or if you've got a good memory, just make sure you know which order they came off in, because you're going to need to put them back on the exact same order. So yeah, 4 of them, they just pop off. And then you're going to take the ignition coil pack off. There's one nut on the top there that I'm unscrewing now, and there's 2 bolts, one of them on the left at the bottom. You'll need an extension on a socket to get at that one, and there's one on the right as well, which is a bit easier to get at. Once you've undone those 3 points of contact, that'll just pop out. You might get a little bit of oil leaking out there. You can plug it with a tissue, and that's the inspection hatch now that you can see. It pops off. That'll give us access to the flywheel, which has got a notch on it. You can see it down there where I've pulled that out now. There's a little notch that we need to line up with a tooth. Release the tension on the pulley, which will then allow you to pop the belt off. So the tension pulley is just out of sight up there where the belt is. You'll need a 13mm spanner to get at that. I forgot to get the footage of that. And now it's time to set the timing. So the crankshaft here, there's a little notch on it that needs to be pointing approximately 10 o'clock. Or 10:30, let's say, and there's a little notch on the flywheel that should be visible through the inspection hatch that we just exposed by taking off the ignition coil pack. If you can't see the notch, you might need to do a full rotation of the crankshaft, as I'm doing here, and once you've done that, you should be able to see through the inspection hatch a little notch on the flywheel, which I think I've got some footage of in a moment. It needs to line up with a tooth. You can see that, there we go, you see the notch on the flywheel there. That needs to line up with that big tooth on the left hand side. So getting a little bit closer now, and you only need to turn the crankshaft a very, very small amount to get that notch to move. You can overshoot it quite easily. It's handy to have a second person here, otherwise you're going to be bouncing backwards and forwards between the inspection hatch and the crankshaft, and that's exactly where you want it, right underneath that tooth. Now for lining up the marks on the crankshaft sprocket, there's a little notch on the engine there that you need to line that mark up with. It's quite hard to see. I put my phone down there, which made it quite a bit easier to line up. From the top it looks a little bit out of line, but from there you can see it's in line. So this is my belt. I'm not going to be replacing it, just putting the same one back on. There's 2 marks on the belts, and make sure you get the belt going in the right direction. It's got arrows on it, coincide with the direction that the engine's going to be turning. and those marks, the 2 marks on the belt, need to line up with the marks on the camshaft sprocket and on the crankshaft. It's a little bit fiddly. You can't really see from the top where the mark is when you're trying to line it up. Again, having a camera down there kind of helped in this situation. One of those little mirrors on a stick might be useful as well. So that's it. I've got all my notches and marks lined up. And now I'm going to tension the belt. I put a little jemmy down there to tension it. It's a bit tricky, you can't really see what you're doing. You got to just go by feel. So I just use that to gently lever. And then with a 13mm spanner, just tighten up that bolt on the tensioning pulley. So this is that from the bottom. As you can see, it's kind of out of sight up there. You're just going by feel. So make sure you've got the belt nice and tight, and at that point you can turn the engine over by hand just a few times. Make sure that all the timing notches are still in line, and then you can put the inspection hatch plug back in, as we are done down there now. Hopefully that just slots in there. It doesn't feel like it's in there very securely, but it seems to stay in. And we're going to put the ignition coil pack back on. So a little bit of oil leaked out there, but no big deal. Okay, it's got that one nut on the top there and the 2 bolts underneath, one on the right hand side and one underneath on the left. And now time for the ignition leads. So we're going to replace these all in the exact same order that they came off in. Very important. Right, back under the wheel arch, we're going to replace this little bit of plastic. This really was the most annoying part of the job. There was a load of footage that I even cut out because it took me so long to try and get this in place. And that is secured with 1 bolt. Try and keep all your nuts and bolts in the same place. It makes it so much easier when you're trying to reassemble everything. Okay, so we're going to put the crankshaft pulley back on, ensuring that the small hole is lined up with a notch on the crankshaft, and you want your drive belt to be behind that as you bolt it on. Otherwise it's too tight. You can't stretch the belt over the outside of the crankshaft pulley. And time to put the wheel arch cover back in. That just clips in around the edge. And the final little bit of trim or cover that goes under here, that can that can be put in place and before you put any bolts into the wheel arch cover. Some of them are dual purpose and the same bolts hold both of the covers on. Yeah, there's that one screw, the Lone Ranger. If anyone's wondering about the suspension, it's adjustable TA Technics from Germany. They're dead cheap. I fitted them a few months ago. They're a bit clunky. Apparently I need to replace the top plate for some aftermarket ones, and that should solve that problem. I'm waiting on those at the moment. Hopefully that'll solve all my issues, as that's kind of the last thing that needs doing for the car to be running nice and smoothly. And now to replace that top plastic cover that goes over the camshaft sprocket. Like I mentioned before, a little bit of it's broken on this car, so I can't bolt mine on, but it holds itself in place using the two electrical cables that cross over it, and those cables kind of clip into the cover itself. Okay, then you can bolt the tank back on. And we're getting pretty close to done now. We've got bolt that on, and then I'm going to clip the air filter and the air box back on. That just slides on there and clips on the other part. And that is job done. I'm just checking for any rogue nuts or bolts or spanners there before I shut the lid. And that's it.